So thank you. The model you've got on your table is the overview of the curriculum structure that we're, striving for 2022, and we'll be in a fortunate position to be able to trial that in 2021 and use 2021 as an opportunity to iron out any issues. And I look forward to your questions today to see if you can uncover any unknown unknowns for us. So as a school, our context, we're in the Adelaide Hills. We're a specialist entrepreneurial school, also a specialist volleyball school, a vet lead school in the Adelaide Hills, and we were the STEM lead school during the last government's STEM strategy priority, and a Category 7 school of the Adelaide Hills. And so in preparation for Year 7s and obviously the building works that have been going on, we really look to redefine what is our purpose as a school. And how do we get the curriculum and those building spaces to actually support the outcomes that we're trying to achieve for our community? And so, looking back in 10 years, we really want our students and our community to feel that our students are a community of passionate people who positively influence their world. And then how do you actually get a curriculum and the pedagogical approaches of teachers to actually support students to develop both their passions and the influences and being able to positively influence other people. So the school has a long track record of curriculum innovation, and when I moved to the school, had big shoes to fill. And as we can see here in terms of curriculum innovation, the school from 2013 to 2020 had a big focus on industry links as a STEM lead school with Jaliek, SA Water and Beerenberg. And in achieving those industry links, there were lots of timetable initiatives that allowed certain groups of teachers to work in an interdisciplinary way, being timetabled at the same time, coming from both maths, technology and the sciences. And I guess the context of this part is that legacy part that Alistair spoke about, is how do you radically change a timetable with people that have been used to working in a certain way for a long time. And so since 2017 and moving into next year will be the third major timetable structural change we've had since 2017. And it's that change process that I think's given our staff the confidence to enter into another change without it seeming like it's too big a change at once. And so in 2018, we introduced a Year 12 study day, extra lessons at Year 12, and an early finish on a Tuesday to support teacher PD. And at that point, the timetable was 7 lines for Years 8 to 11 and 5 for Year 12. In 2018, we carried out a whole-scale curriculum review involving 150 students in that process, our staff and our community. I won't go into a lot of detail of that, but what it basically showed from a student perspective is they thought that they learnt more in the project learning-based work that was happening in STEM when their teachers worked together collectively in team-based team teaching approaches, and when there was an opportunity to work on project or product-based learning opportunities. And so that led us to creating a new timetable for 2019 that addressed one of the interesting things that the students said when we asked them, what are we not doing that you want to get more of? And so basically the students there said that they thought they weren't getting enough on relationships and well-being. They weren't getting enough input, particularly on financial literacy, that we thought was really interesting, and they wanted more input on careers education. And so that led to something called the LIFT program, which was a 90-minute block of time that happened whole school Tuesday afternoons that was based on a range of inquiry units linked to careers education, but not the dry, dull delivery model. We actually had inquiry units like, what are the 10 worst jobs in the world and why do people do them? So we tried to, and at Year 12, should I stay or should I go, when we looked at financial literacy. And so having these inquiry-based units where we use the general capabilities, particularly critical creative thinking and the personal social capability as the drivers for assessment, and ensured that we were, as a school, starting to move down that road of using the capabilities for assessment. So in 2019, we also enabled extra time for core lessons at Year 10 and additional lessons in Year 11 and Year 12. And so this is just a summary of the different structures that occurred across the school at that point. And so what we can see there is Year 8 and 9 were an 8-line timetable, but at Year 10 we gave extra time to the core, so for English, maths, science and humanities, and then at year 11, to ensure that we actually got all the students in on this short day, we had research projects split over line 2 and line 1. And so you can imagine in 2018 with a new timetable that had different lengths of days that was used to support the shortened day, but also extra time at year 12, what we found was that staff, when they had multiple different times on different days, both students and staff, it just took up too much time for them to focus on where do I need to be at certain times over different days, that we said we needed to go back to making the times equal over those different days. And so it's that background work that I guess led us towards the goals that we're striving for now. And so we really want to continue the whole thrive element of SASPA by ensuring students can go deeper in their learning and get to that point of transference. And we want the specialist students, so our specialisations both within music, volleyball and entrepreneurial learning, we want students to be able to move from that novice to proficient or expert within our specialisations. And by also moving to a non-line timetable and reducing curriculum time for certain areas, our specialisations, particularly volleyball, could be put at risk. And so we also understand that real strong foundation in mathematics and English at years 7 and 8 builds the foundation by which students can apply their learning across the rest of the curriculum. Now, retaining students in the higher band or increasing the students to the higher band, it's not about students actually getting into the higher band, it's about the skills that they have if they're in the higher band. So it's really clear to me that students that are at band 9 and 10 by year 9 are already really accomplished at critical creative thinking. They can already analyse information, they can synthesise information, they can justify their opinions, they can bring different bits of information together and actually justify reasons for why that information is actually important and valid. So a key part to having this really strong foundation for English and mathematics is around developing those foundation skills that they can go and be supported into the more higher order thinking. So supporting that idea around good career education, all students at Heathfield from years 7 to 9 will be involved in our career strategy, and that starts in years 7 and 8 around uncovering passions and talents. And we use something called the Career Tools website to support that, which has a range of quizzes in there that students can actually assess themselves on and be given a report to, which actually provides them with key careers that could be linked to their personality type. And we don't just leave it there, they then fill out, they complete something called a career plan, and within that career plan they set themselves goals and aspirations for the future, but not planning 5 years ahead, just short-term goals where our staff, home group teachers in particular, sit with them to discuss and unpack for those students what their barriers to learning might be or what their barriers for them reaching their potential could be. And so in terms of the development of this timetable approach, we're looking for opportunities at years 7 and 8 and through the curriculum across stages and year levels of interdisciplinary approaches, where we're trying to move towards a more problem-based learning approach, particularly within the entrepreneurial curriculum. And our entrepreneurial curriculum is going to be delivered through the humanities curriculum, and so all students from 2022 at years 7 and 8 will receive the entrepreneurial curriculum at Heathfield High School, with other learning areas able to be a part of interdisciplinary teams. So year 7s in 2022, there'll be interdisciplinary approaches with the technologies and the humanities, and at year 8 it will be the arts and the humanities learning area. And so we also want to provide students in the senior school with extra time to be able to get to that higher order thinking skills and to get the deep understanding and transference that's so highly pushed within the new SACE Thrive agenda. And so what we realised was that the typical ways of structuring a curriculum were not going to enable us to achieve what we wanted. So what were the influences of making the next changes that we had to look at? So we've got a collective agreement in the school that maths and English will be the foundation from where everything else will grow. And we had to be really conscious that the arts and languages and HPE were going to be, I guess, the biggest losers through the changes that I'm going to show you in just a second. But one thing that was quite interesting is that even though we've been through these 3 timetable changes recently, languages has always said that big blocks of time have been a bit of a barrier for them, and they would like smaller blocks of times more frequently so that they can get that repetitive nature for language acquisition. And so in this new timetable structure, we're actually able to individually timetable languages so that they get those single lessons and not having the double lessons of other sections of the timetable. Volleyball, obviously, we need our students to get the time to become the high-level athletes that they do become. And so in this curriculum model that I will show, volleyball was going to lose half the time at Year 8 and Year 9. And so that was going to be a really big issue for them and also for me, because we're first or second in the country for volleyball. We need to maintain that high-level program that does involve 25% of our students. Emerging in through the LIFT program and through with the maths, science and STEM, there was a real undercurrent for wanting to deliver direct instruction and have direct timing for teaching programming. And so we needed to find a way, how do we get some of this space into our curriculum time where we can actually teach programming and all students get some exposure to that. And so it was, and I'll come to how we've done that in a moment, and it was also around then saying, how do we then make a link between all of these competing areas and then the fact that we're also an entrepreneurial school where we look at the general capabilities with the 7 capabilities, and then there's around 100 plus focus areas in each of the, if we looked at the totality of those focus areas across the 7 capabilities, how do we actually make sense out of that for our staff and for our students if we're going to assess these over time? So the 5 entrepreneurial schools, 3 or 4 in this room at the moment, actually worked with each other to come up with the entrepreneurial capability wheel. And within this as a school, what we've done is taken each of the sub-strands here and mapped those against the 7 capabilities. And so we're not there yet, but as a school, this might become the way in which we actually assess all 7 of the general capabilities, but under the umbrella of entrepreneurial learning capabilities. So what does this look like in terms of how we're using the time? So we wanted to go through a process of modelling and refining. And so in week 10, term 4 last year, spent 4 days with a consultant from Education Time to come up with the curriculum model that's on your table. And there were actually 6 models that we went through developing. And leadership then, and there's 14 leaders at the school, we spent 6 weeks of term 1 deciding which model we were going to go for, and we tweaked Model 5 and we ended up with Model 5 version 3. And so when you're going to make such a big change, you actually need to know that it's going to work, because there's nothing to go back to once you've got all your subject selections done and you're basing it all on that model, so it's got to work. And so we did invest in 5 days of time with timetabling solutions to actually trial this timetable on our previous year's data, and we were really pleased that it does work. And obviously there's some trade-offs, and there's also some real wins, and the timetabler from the school, Danielle Spear, will talk to you about those wins and the kind of used to think, now I think guiding principle around after going through this process. So here's what it looks like. So it's actually a 10-day timetable. So there will be a week 1, week 2, and that was the best way for us to be able to split time across some of those learning areas where you've got a really strange number of minutes when you're looking at national curriculum time of 124 minutes. Given a school's timetable, how do you get to that in an easy way? So what we've got here is LIFT. All students get that for 2 lessons a week, and that's on a Tuesday morning. Science has gone in years 7, 8 to 6 lessons a fortnight, 3 a week. Arts and languages to 5 lessons a fortnight. Now, I spoke about HPE, so we can see there they've gone from effectively 8 lessons a week down to 8 lessons a fortnight down to 4, and that's where students did the specialist volleyball program, so where their time was effectively being halved. Arts here have lost 3 lessons a fortnight. So we thought, how do we actually now still give the people that enter the school specialist volleyballers the time that they need to develop those skills? So that's where we came up with the idea of Empowering Futures. So Empowering Futures will be 4 lessons a fortnight where all students who do volleyball will also do Empowering Futures. So that's where they get their additional volleyball time. If you're not a volleyballer, you'll one semester be part of a creative arts interdisciplinary project, or you'll be doing computer programming, whereby then the connection between the computer programming, where maths is now getting 5 lessons a week, English is getting 5 lessons a week, so the maths and the benefit of pulling programming out of technology means that the technology teachers can now put more of their time into the development of their projects rather than teaching the coding language. And so the empowering futures, and one of the key points straight away that some parents have already asked as well, what about the volleyballers and programming? And at this stage, just for 2021, that will have an impact on the volleyball students, but in 2022, we will put the volleyball students into the same technology class so that they then get a specific input on programming through their technology lessons. So the devil's in the detail. The detail's on the back page of that structure. And I think the benefit of this is that it enables us, we can change each year, slight tweaks to who gets what amount of time depending on where we get to. But doing this process at the end of last year, using the staffing that I had, knowing the modelling of the students that were coming into the school, what staff was I actually going to need to staff the school for 2022? And I found out that I was 169 periods short of maths teachers. In total, I needed to recruit 12.9 teachers for 2022, but the maths part was really important for me, so I've been really proactive in recruiting maths teachers this year, and things are looking really good for that learning area moving forward. I also know that a lot of the English maths that I'll need at Year 7 is also calculated in these numbers, and so when we get that opportunity to recruit in Term 4, I'm really clear on the skill sets that I need for teachers coming into the school. So this is what a Year 7 timetable could look like, and I've just put the names of subjects on there to be representative. And so the idea is that in our rebuilding project, we'll have a whole floor dedicated to Year 7s and 8s, and so they'll have basically a home base for 2022 at least. We'll see how it goes through 2022. I've colour-coded the different teachers, so in this case 7.1's got a literacy-based teacher, Literature 1, who would also teach that class for global learnings. And so if we then looked at a class that might be 7.4, Literature 1 might teach that class for literacy and global as well, whereas 7.4 might be the maths science teacher that's in here teaching 7.1 for maths and science. And by being able to put the blocks of lessons anywhere, we can actually sit down with teams and say, right, well, where do you want your blocks of time to go? And by timetabling off lines, we can actually allocate the lessons to wherever we want to suit whatever strategy we're trying to achieve. But in going through this process, what we can see is that there'll be a minimum of 4 teachers for a Year 7 student, and in a recent questioning session with 14 primary teachers, and I said, oh look, what's the average number of teachers a primary school student would have? And they said about 4, sometimes 5. And so we'll try and keep it within that range, and we'll see how we go during the process of putting this all together. So I'm just going to hand over to Danielle, who's going to talk through the barriers and trade-offs.
Speaking in public, but I've agreed to do this to try to get across our thinking. So in terms of our barriers and trade-offs, it's a big process, and we've had to look at many different issues that have come up and try to keep everyone as happy as possible along the way, which we know is not always possible. High school teachers in this scenario may be teaching more than 5 classes at in any given semester, and so this is a change of thinking, because if you've suddenly only got 3 periods a week for your art class, for example, that's not going to fill up someone's load very quickly. And so some people have been very creative in this process, and for example, Lindsay Crowe, our arts teacher, has come up with this creative arts unit. And what that's going to do is keep those staff at a full-time level doing what they want to do and working in an interdisciplinary way. So there's some positive benefits coming from that. in that instance, more teachers are therefore teaching across disciplines, and that team teaching that our students are asking for will be occurring more often. Equity of workloads. We do potentially have some imbalance, so if you're doing a split across a fortnight of a 3-2 split to get your 5 lessons in arts, that can change people's loads, and so we're having to really look carefully at which staff are placed where to make sure they get a balance. And also that some staff will be doing 23 lessons in one week and 21 in the other. NIT and face-to-face teaching loads potentially calculated over 2 weeks, and this in itself is an issue and an agreement that we have to have with people. And so again, that's, our daily organiser's got to think about that around reliefs and things like that, and there's all these processes there that need to be quite explicit and understood by everyone so that we are moving through those things together and understanding what that means for individual workloads. This is what our timetable will look like in terms of number of minutes per lesson. 6 lessons a day. We also have a longer break at the beginning of the day, and this was something that Alistair worked with me on when he was still there, and our staff have continued to vote that in. So it is working for us, and most people are preferring that. You'll see that there's no neat times. In this sort of model, we've got an 18-minute home group, 52-minute lessons to get the maximum curriculum time, and so the start and finish times of lessons are not ideal, but because we use bells, we can manage this, and really it's about, we could even streamline this a little bit further yet and look at the start time and finish time of the day. I had a few thoughts along the way when we were doing this, and what we're moving towards is called a non-parity timetable. So no particular subject has the same amount of time as another, and at each year level that looks different. And so we were forced, in a sense, to move to a non-blocked timetable. And in doing that, it's a big shift. It's a big thinking shift for me as the timetabler. But it's also a big shift for all staff in terms of their thinking and how that time's managed. And like Roy said, it gives us more flexibility in terms of placing people. All right, so we had huge deficits in some learning areas with an 8-line model in terms of the time applied according to Australian curriculum recommendations. And our agreed to priorities were that maths and English were the basis for everything. And so we've made this shift over a period of years to reduce the time in some subject areas and then reverse that for core subject areas that everyone has agreed need to be the basis. During 2021, we're about 13 rooms short, and we have to timetable using that space. One of the things that I was jumpy about when this timetable was first shown to me was how we were going to do this with so many rooms down. And in fact, this model is going to be so much more efficient on our learning spaces and their use that we didn't need to bring in transportable buildings for the following year. So having that flexibility around some areas wanting doubles, some wanting more singles, that is allowing us to create that flexibility and to actually use those spaces more efficiently. And we're hoping, if everything goes to plan, that about mid-year next year some of that will free up again and we'll be able to spread out a little bit. Despite subjects having different number of lessons, Year 11 and 12 will remain fully blocked in our timetable. If you have a look at the model, you've got 11 lessons versus 9, so we've shifted 2 of those lessons off to one of the Year 11 lines so that if you're a Year 11 teacher, you may not be able to teach Year 12 at some times, and especially if you're teaching on this one particular line. So what we've had to do with that is look at which staff we're applying to that line, and they will tend to be people like our leaders that don't have many teaching lines, so we've got that flexibility again. So we had to carefully place our subjects on that line to make sure we could make that work. And so lots of thinking around who and where. And I guess the best thing about this model is if we know ahead of time who our part-time teachers are, you know, what days they want to work, and we try to be flexible around their needs, we can really accommodate them by placing lessons around the day that they want off. So we can actually predict that, know it, and avoid what we're having a little bit of a problem with this year, which is permanent relief lessons, and just, you know, keep it moving forward in the sense that we're looking after their needs, but making sure the students' needs are being met as well and not missing those lessons. Right, and obviously the interdisciplinary learning, this allows us to put teams of teachers together on days, or even just as a group of teachers that students move through that work as teams as well.
Cool. So one thing just to pick up also on what Alistair said is I'm a firm believer that the timetable can actually be an improvement lever and a strategic tool for trying to support and deliver whatever your improvement planning priorities are. So even given the time that we've got, I really believe it's achievable, and there's time for everyone to have a crack. So thank you very much for your time this morning, and look forward to your questions.
Hi Roy, how are you?
Good, looking forward to some questions.
In the absence of somebody else standing at the microphone, it looks like I'm asking the first question. Really? Nobody else wants to beat me to it? That was such a rich presentation. Thank you very much for that. I'm a little bit confused, and I'm hoping you can help me. At times when I heard about your timetable for 2022, I heard that it wasn't lined, but it was blocked. And then at other times I heard that there were lines for teachers. And is this a timetable that's lined or non-lined?
So year 11 and 12 effectively sit under a line structure, but they have different amounts of lessons. So year 12s will have 11 lessons a fortnight, and year 11s will have 9 lessons a fortnight. Then when you move into years 7, 8, 9 and 10, completely offline, and by that we're actually, and if I go to say year 8 here, you've got the English and math sets at 10 lessons a fortnight, then we have a STEAM block of 28 lessons in there, but what we've actually got is languages with 5, you've got health with 5, humanities with 7, science with 6 and arts with 5. And so that block there enables some interdisciplinary placement of lessons, so we can actually say, right, well we want, and for example our entrepreneurial group at year 8, they're actually going to be on the B half in that year 8 block in their class 4 and 5, and so they'll be timetabled at the same time for humanities, but both classes will have the same technology teacher, and so then when they're rotating around, there could be a situation where the technology teacher is teaching a group of students in entrepreneurial, but where the humanities class is also on at the same time with entrepreneurial, and they can blur the lines of the discipline at that point and actually focus on project-based learning. But what we can then do is actually have them linked at the same time, but they may only come together to work in that cross-disciplinary way every couple of weeks. So it'll be up to the teaching team to decide when they're going to do that. In this model, the languages, so French, Japanese at year 8 will have single lessons throughout the 10 days, well spaced, so that they can actually have the frequency of meeting with their students, but not 100-minute lessons. They'll only have the 50-minute blocks. So I guess to answer the question there, Peter, at 7, 8, 9 and 10, it's unlined. When we're structuring the timetable though, and there's a section called blocking, when you're actually putting the lessons into the structure, you're trying to obviously fit as many blocks of lessons underneath each other, under the year 12 and 11 blocking, so that you prevent any clashes between classes and teachers through the timetable. No other questions? Oh.
Given that you've been through a number of timetable changes in recent years and many schools are looking at something different in 2022, I guess what some wisdom you could share around bringing your parents, students and teachers on board with you, and also how did you go about supporting the teachers in the learning areas that may have reduced time with the students? So how did you get them on board for these changes?
Okay, so that started back in 2018 with a whole-scale curriculum review where teachers, students were all interviewed, and the broad questions there were, to what extent does our curriculum support students to develop the deep skills they need for SACE? To what extent is our curriculum supporting students to develop 21st century learning capabilities? So that was the kind of in for the general capabilities. And then based on the feedback that we got from all of the teachers, the parents who answered the questionnaire we put out, plus the students, it was quite clear that something needed to change. And so then there was an opportunity for kind of modelling that with staff to say, well, what would that look like? Particularly when students were saying that they find they learn more or more effectively when they're working in groups or they're working with teachers who are working together. So that was really the starting point for driving the interdisciplinary change from a timing change to create what was called the LIFT program, which was 90 minutes a week. And we also had another part there where for many years at Year 9, students wanted to be able to do languages, volleyball and music. And on a 7-line timetable, we couldn't achieve it. So we went to the 8-line timetable just for years 8 and 9 to enable that Year 9 change to occur. And so by doing that, that then led to reduced time for a lot of the subjects that had always had a full line. So it was that starting point, getting used to it. And so at that point, arts would have, say, for example, 180 minutes a week. In this new model with 5 lessons per fortnight, I think it works out to be 125 minutes a week. So it's only a fractional, a small change from what they've now been used to for a couple of years. Did that answer the question? Yep. Okay.
Hi, Roy. It looks like a very complex timetable, and you mentioned you can't avoid permanent release. So is that...
That was our previous timetable, so one in here. So this is the current timetable you're using. I'm going to have to get to it. So the one that had the multicolours, let me just find that. Okay. So here, with part-time staff who teach mainly middle school, it could lead to, say for example, a staff member that teaches line 8 and line 4 in years, line 8 and line 5 would lead a teacher having to come in just for day 3 for the line 8 subject. And so we have 18 part-time staff, of those 8 are 0.6, and there were a number of occasions where staff were having to come in for one lesson, and so we had a few situations where, due to childcare and stuff like that, where we had then a permanent relief for those lessons. And so in this model, we can actually move that lesson into a different location of the timetable when they're in, so that they can actually teach the full amount of that number of lessons to their students.
So what about the clashes for the, you said mainly your leaders do the 11-12s, but what about the clashes as far as senior teachers and teaching across 7 to 10, or are they?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely possible. So we've had a guiding principle for a few years now that Year 12 teachers need to teach a Year 8 or 9 class, and that's been a key design principle of this timetable, that anyone teaching at Year 12 or Year 11 can also teach Year 8 or Year 7, but we'll see what happens there in terms of the primary recruitment process we have.
I heard you were talking about how you creatively use some of your excess art teachers. Have you had other learning areas where the staffing hasn't matched what your future needs are, and how are you deploying those staff and how are you getting the staff engaged with those changes?
Currently overstaffed in PE, so I'll be working with PE teachers to see what their second subject area would be. And in most cases there's some science there, but it'll be, there was a questionnaire that went out to teachers at the start of this year saying if you could work in an interdisciplinary team in the middle school, particularly at year 7 and 8, who would be up for that and want to be a part of that team. And I had 14 staff put up their hand for that from across a range of disciplines. And that's with the direct understanding that they know that they'd be working as a cross-disciplinary team. And so we've got a core group of people there that will really support trying to, I guess, address any over or understaffing that this timetable would create. All right. I'm going to take that as my cue to sit down. Thank you.